Welcome. Today is the 19th day of Tishrei, the 5th day of Sukkot, and the 21st of October. And we're going to be talking today about the main article, maybe the last article actually, in this week's Wonders. I hope you've already accessed it, downloaded it, maybe read it. You can get it on patreon.com/galeinai, Galeinai. And as we explained 2 weeks ago, this year we're going to be focusing on a partsuf, on a model each week that's related to the parsha of the Torah portion of the week. So the Torah portion this week, most of the week we don't even read it, because we read the special readings for Sukkot, but in the background, we're leading up to the first Shabbat of the year, when we will read the first Torah portion of the year, Bereishit, which means in the beginning. And because we're going to be reading Bereishit, so we chose one of Rav Ginsburg's most important models, or partsufim, as they're called in Hebrew. A partsuf is literally a persona, but we translate it as a model. And this model is of the 4 reasons brought by the sages in different places for why God created the world. Now, in the article, unfortunately, there was not enough room to do even slight justice to this model. So we basically just brought the bare bones of the whole thing, and just in a cursory manner went over the 4 different reasons. So here the model is constructed out of knowing enough Torah, knowing enough of the rabbinic sources, to know that there are 4 different reasons cited for why God created the world. But to even begin to deal with this question, we have to explain the word reason. What do we mean when we say a reason? Because if we're going to be claiming that we know God's mind, that's very problematic. So we can't exactly use reason in the same way that we use it colloquially, the way we use it in day-to-day language. So we're going to have to define what reason really means, and we're going to dedicate today to that topic. What exactly does it mean? What is a reason for which God created the world? Before we do that, let me just still go over the model itself, just so that you get an idea about it. And the first reason is that God craves to have a dwelling place below. And this is the famous one that's brought in the Tanya. It comes from a Medrash, Tanchuma. And it is well known that in Hasidic thought this is considered to be the highest reason. The reason it's considered to be the highest is because of the word craves, nitava in Hebrew. Craving, as they say in Hasidic folklore, has no reason. So this is the closest to saying that there is no reason. It's a reason that's without a reason, and we'll see what that means in a moment. The second one is God wants to be recognized. This comes from the Zohar. It's a very interesting statement. What does it mean that God wants to be recognized? Does God need to be recognized? Incidentally, this happened by divine providence, that in my personal Patreon, patreon.com/mgenuth, I'm teaching now in our psychology classes about transactional analysis. And transactional analysis starts with the proposition that every person needs recognition. We need recognition. And this recognition that we need as people, recognition from others, and something that's not so much discussed in transactional analysis, recognition from ourselves. A person needs to be able to give himself or herself recognition. So this all stems from this very interesting reason that the Zohar says that God created the world in order to be recognized. It's as if God put into the superstructure of reality the need to have recognition, the need for there to be someone else, even the someone else inside of me, who sees me, who recognizes my existence, who recognizes, hopefully also the good things that I do, my accomplishments, and so on. The third reason is called the nature of the good is to do good. And the good here refers to God, of course, so we put it even with a capital G. And we always say that God comes from the word good. So the nature of the good is to do good. And the world is a good thing. And how it's a good thing? Because it gives us free will, because we can grow from it, we develop through it, and most importantly, much more important than our personal growth and development, is the fact that we can choose to serve God. That choice, to be able to choose of our own accord to serve God, to nullify ourselves before God's will, is the great goodness of this world. And that, by the way, is what we're talking about in our morning classes in Daily Chassidus on my channel also. The fourth reason, which amazingly is also the topic of the morning classes, is there cannot be a king without a people. And we're discussing that in some depth. We actually discussed it in some depth this morning. There's still a lot more to say about it. We'll try to say some more about it in these classes that we only have today, tomorrow, and Wednesday to discuss this partzuf, this model. So hopefully we'll get a lot of it in. So now going back to creation itself. There is something that needs to be said about the first word of the Torah, which has to do with how we understand creation and what we expect to be able to even discover by asking certain questions. Now, this is almost the difference between a sentient and non-sentient creation. What I want to stress is that we need to approach ourselves, whether we're Jewish or not, as originally non-sentient in a certain sense. That we are all very exteriorly motivated. We look at the world in a very superficial manner. Our consciousness finds it very hard to penetrate deeply into reality, all the more so into our own inner reality. It's very difficult. Most of us live our lives at a very, very superficial level, and we need to accept the fact that we have to go through a certain transformation, which takes time, in order to begin to appreciate what we call the inner depth of what the Torah is teaching. So many times people will even read the rabbinic statements, things that the sages said, and they'll interpret them in a very superficial manner. This is all encapsulated actually in the first word of the Torah. This idea that there is a superficial level to reality and an inner level to reality. An inner creation and an exterior creation. So let's look at this word. In Hebrew it's Bereishit. It's made out of 6 letters, which can be divided into 2 words. Bereishit. And this is a very famous thing, this division of the first word into these 2 words, Bereishit, which means created 6, literally. And the way that this is usually understood, where this came from in the Tikkunei Zohar, is that after the word Bereishit, there are 6 more words in the Torah's first verse. But we're not going to go into that in that direction. We're going to go into a completely different direction right now. What does this verb bara, created, actually mean? To understand this phrase, created 6, we have to understand what the nature of creation means vis-a-vis God. So, there are two meanings to this word. Literally, it means creating something out of that which is imperceivable. We're talking about that a lot in the morning classes. I don't want to repeat all that. You can go to those and look them up and see what that means. But the world was not created out of nothingness in the sense that there was nothing and then there was something. No, the world is not like that. The world is a certain way in which God presents us with his being, with his absolute being. He presents, it's almost like he's showing us himself in the form of creation. And yet, creation is not God. It's only an image that's being projected. And we call this the he'ara, or the luminance that's coming out of God's essence. And so it doesn't affect him, and there's a lot to be said about that. I'm not going to get into that. But what we will say here is that when we analyze this word in Hebrew a little bit deeper, to create, bara, bet reish aleph, it really stems from two places, two meanings of its two-letter root. Its two-letter root is bet reish. The aleph is not part of two-letter roots for a lot of reasons. Again, not the place to discuss why. Bet reish means two things. It can either mean bringing something out. Bar. Bar means in Aramaic and in Hebrew. In Hebrew, the bar is the chaff that you take out of the grain when you prepare flour, for instance. So you first remove the chaff, then you grind the seed, the germ, into flour. The chaff is called bar. It's called something that's removed, something that's taken out. So many times we say that bar means to reveal. To bring something out is to reveal it. But bar also means a son. There's a very famous word that many people know, bar mitzvah. Bar mitzvah means a son of mitzvot, meaning that the child has reached an age when he is obligated by the commandments, so he's a child of the commandments now. Bar mitzvah. It also means he's attained it. There's another meaning of it, but literally means the son. Bar. What's the difference between these two things? That for me to reveal myself is very different than for me to have a child. And God did both things when he created the world. On the one hand, he revealed himself, as we said, superficially, externally. On the other hand, he also had a child. A child is a direct continuation of the Father. A child has the Father in them. And again, this is a topic we're discussing in the morning classes, what this actually means. To be a person who understands things with an inner depth means to connect to the fact that creation is also God bringing out himself in his children. And the entire Jewish people are called God's children. This is in Deuteronomy 34. Banim atem la'Hashem Elokechem. You are, not 34 and 14. You are sons of Havaya, your God. And what we mean by that is that the child is someone who has a soul, who has a perception of the true want, the true will of what his father wants. He has a true understanding of what his father expects. This is not something that everyone has. You have to be a child of the infinite in order to have that perception. And just the fact that you're born Jewish, it means that you have some potential for it, because you already are a son of God, says the verse. But it doesn't mean that your consciousness is ready for it yet. It could be that you still have to study a great deal. So you have to enter into this world of inner understanding in order to understand creation, to see what the backbone, the true backbone of creation is. It's like to understand God's thought. Now you can see why this is very relevant, because we're talking about the reason for creation. If we're going to be giving a reason that makes sense to us, that's not God's reason. We have to penetrate much more deeply, as it were, to adopt, to approach in some way, the consciousness of God in order to be able to answer this question: why did God create the world? So that's the one meaning of Bar, the son. And that is hinted at in the three other letters of the Torah's first word, which are Shit, Shin Yud Taf. Shin Yud Taf, you'll recognize, is Shet with a Yud inside. Shet is Seth in English. That was Adam's third son, the son that he and Eve had after they reconciled. And he is considered to be the father of humanity. His son was called Enosh. And in Hebrew, when we say humanity, we say Enoshut. We call all of humanity after the name of Adam's grandchild from his son Seth. Okay? Why does it have a Yud inside? First of all, it's the son, in the same way that Adam had a son. It's like saying that the souls in the world are like the sons of God that can understand his inner meaning. So Seth, Adam's son, is like Adam himself, but he also has the Yud inside, and the Yud has many, many allusions. It could be the Ten Commandments, meaning the Torah inside, that it's through the Torah that one comes to perceive God's mind, and so on. There's many different allusions to this. We won't get into them. We just don't have enough time. And then, after Bereishit, bara Shit, he created Shit. And Shit here means, again, this son aspect, this being a child of God aspect, being a soul that can perceive God's intent. Then we have 6 more words in the verse, and those 6 words say something else. They say, Bara Elokim et hashamayim v'et haaretz. God created the heavens and the earth. And that is the superficial aspect of bara. That is the superficial aspect of creation, which is just to reveal. And the revelation is external. It's, like we said, like a projection, like throwing out a picture of who I am. But it's not, it's the same thing as if I would show you a picture of me and ask you, so what are my thoughts? What do I believe in? What are my feelings? You can't tell that from a picture. And yet, most of the time we live in this very superficial approach to reality where we're only looking at the projection, we're only looking at the picture. But we're not penetrating through our soul into the deeper sense of what it means to be connected to God, and therefore being able to answer a question such as, why did God create the world? So these answers, they're not logical answers, as we'll see. They can be logical, you can explain them logically, we'll try to also explain them logically, but their root is not logic. Rather, their root is an experiential feeling that comes from the infinite itself. And I don't want to say those words without giving some kind of explanation of what they mean, because we want to turn to the model, but I want to get into this a little bit more deeply, even though we won't have time to cover everything that there is to say about this. But I want us to have a better understanding what it means that we're looking for answers reasons for creation that are not logical, meaning they're not even, in a certain sense, you can't really debate them. You can't really discuss them in a certain sense. They're not something that came about through dialogue, through exchanging ideas. They didn't come from there. In the same way that when I understand my Father, these are things that I didn't arrive at by debating with someone else what my Father wanted. It's an understanding that comes from being His Son and from being connected to Him. It's a different type of realization. It's a different type of perception. So we said we do two today, so we're ending this one right now. And stay on the Zoom. Don't go anywhere. I'm going to stop the Facebook, and we'll start another one. Thanks for joining.